Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show with Jason Hartman. You're about to learn a new slant on investing, some exciting techniques, and fresh new approaches to the world's most historically proven asset class that will enable you to create more wealth and freedom than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine self-made multimillionaire who's actually been there and done it. He's a successful investor, lender, developer, and entrepreneur who's owned properties in 11 states, had hundreds of tenants, and been involved in thousands of real estate transactions. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to your financial independence day. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Welcome to episode 1516. Today, our guest will be none other than Bryan Adams. No, not the singer, not the summer of 69. Remember last week, I told you about the inflation rates since the summer of 69. But no, this Bryan Adams manages a commercial real estate fund, and he was just a fantastic guest. We did a great interview talking about demographics, economics, different segments of real estate, commercial, residential. I think you'll really like this. And it was a fairly long interview, so we will do part 1 today and part 2 tomorrow. And today, though, we have another Bryan, and that is one of our team members, a very valuable team member that's been with us for just a few months now. And he is on the show for his very first time. Bryan, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Jason?
Good. We've got like Bryan Squared today, don't we?
That's awesome. You can always use another Bryan.
2 Bryans are better than 1. Yes.
I believe so.
Yes. Yes, they are. But hey, the reason we have Bryan here today is that I asked him and he graciously agreed to be our tech support concierge for our upcoming Meet the Masters event, which starts on Friday and goes Friday evening, all day Saturday and Sunday. And if you have any help you need with Zoom or the social network that we're going to be talking about or anything like that, you will receive an email and a text message with his email address and phone number, so you can just reach out direct and no need to panic. Getting online, we want to make this as smooth and easy as possible for you. And Bryan, what should we go over first? Let's tell them about the exciting social network. I think that's pretty cool. It's the first time.
Yeah.
First time.
Yeah. I mean, we developed this new social network. We want to do something kind of interesting and different to be able to showcase what we do, give a great place for people to interact and network and interact. So I'm pretty excited about it. I know we've been working on it for quite some time. And so, yeah, with Meet the Masters, we're going to be revealing it for the very first time.
Yeah. And so what this will be is, in doing in a virtual event, it's obviously different than a physical event, but we want to try and bridge any gaps that are not available in a virtual event. So one of them is networking. You know, you don't get to see people in person. You don't get to shake hands with them. And you might miss some of the small talk and just sort of the little things that come up with an in-person event. So what Bryan has been really working on, and I just can't wait till everybody gets in there and starts using it, is a social network where everybody will be invited. Look for an email, or actually you'll probably get 2 emails on that, one from us and another from the system itself. And you'll get invited to this. You can go in, and our speakers will be posting content in there. Our local market specialists will be posting properties in there, and you can post questions in there, and we will be putting poll results in there because we'll be taking some polls throughout the event, all kinds of good stuff like that. What else do we want people to know about that, Bryan?
Actually, the event information will be there as well. So if you get lost or if you forget where it's at, you just have to log in. Also, the network is available on mobile too. So you can log in on your mobile phone as well in case you want to watch it on your mobile phone or interact while you're on your mobile phone. That's definitely available too.
Yeah, good stuff. And so let's just go over the hours again and the fact that we are actually going to, for another first for us, we're going to have 2 stages at this event, or 2 rooms. Always before for our events, we just had 1 big room, but this time we will have 2, and we will be having some breakout session opportunities. And when the room isn't being used, the second room isn't being used for an actual breakout session, a presentation, it'll be kind of a lounge area and a little networking area, so people can go in there and do informal things and stuff like that. But so both links to these different rooms will be available in the social network. And let's go over the hours again. So if it's impossible, Brian, isn't it impossible when you have people around the world, you just can't make the hours work for everybody, can you?
That's true. That's true. I know we're on different time zone ourselves.
Yeah, you're in Pacific time. I'm on Eastern time. We have people attending from Europe, Australia, Asia, and they're all on different time zones too. So we get it, folks. But look, if it was like our typical event where you're flying in, you would be jet lagged and you don't have to go through all that. So you just have to, make it a slumber party and stay up for us. I actually interviewed someone for the podcast yesterday, and he was in the Philippines, and it was like midnight where he was, and we still did a great show. So that's the thing. But the hours, again, just to reiterate, you can find this all at jasonhartman.com/masters, but the hours are Friday evening, and I'll just do them in Eastern time, my time zone, 7 p.m. Eastern. Then on Saturday and Sunday, we start at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So if you're in the Pacific time, that'll be Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. We'll start for you. And Saturday and Sunday morning at 8 a.m. So bring your coffee or tea for that, and we'll get a start bright and early for you. And on the East Coast, you'll just be a little bit into the event. You'll be ready for lunch. So it's real easy. It's real easy. But I think the important thing to know is 2 links for 2 rooms will be shared in the social network. And we just wanted to tell you that and, give you a little detail. Brian, you're also going to be sending out emails and text message, right?
Correct. So we will have email going out outlining all this again, what we're talking about now. And then you'll get an email for becoming a part of the new social network we talked about. And then we'll have updates on when we'll start and text as well to let you guys know where we're at in each day.
Good stuff, and what presentations are coming up and stuff like that. And I'll just give you a rough outline of the schedule, by the way. So Friday evening, we're going to start with a welcome. And by the way, please bring a drink, like an adult beverage, beer, wine, bring a cocktail. I'd say you should make a cash flow cocktail because that's what the event is about. And that's what we'll start with on Friday afternoon or evening, as the saying goes, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. And I think that definitely applies to a virtual event that spans time zones. And then we will have Sharon Lechter sort of kicking us off on Friday. She'll be talking about the Napoleon Hill book that she wrote in concert with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. It's just excellent, Outwitting the Devil. And she'll kick us off for that. And we'll go for about 2 hours on Friday. And then Saturday morning, we'll be kicking off with Harry Dent, the renowned economist. We'll have my presentation after Harry Dent. We will have several market profile presentations. And those are pretty short and snappy, by the way, because you can network with a local market specialist inside the social network and get more information there. And then some of them will probably jump into the breakout room and you can meet them in there as well. And then we will close out Saturday with George Gammon. And George Gammon will be talking about the consumer price index and what it really means to you. And then Sunday morning, we'll be kicking it off with Ken McElroy, renowned investor, rich dad author, as is Sharon Lechter as well. And then we've got a bunch of other stuff on Sunday, just a bunch of great content. And I believe we will be also ending up Sunday with George Gammon as our last guest speaker for Sunday. He's speaking 2 times, so that'll really be neat. We're doing kind of a follow-on session with George, so I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I don't know, did I miss anything else? I'm sure I missed some things there, folks, but that's the basic idea.
No, it looks great. I think there's a lot happening. I mean, we have a really packed schedule, so I think it's going to be an amazing event.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And Brian, thank you for all your help. I am super excited. The first time is the hardest. It is a virtual event. I'm sure it won't go perfectly, but the nice thing is we have an MC, and that is Sean Carroll, our client. Actually, he's a professional MC. So it's the first time we have that, and I think that'll make my job a little easier so I can focus on content and what I do. So that'll be good. And he'll be emceeing the event. There's a lot of stuff you can do with a virtual event that you can't do with a live event. And so I'm really excited about some of that stuff as well. But anyway, we've got our guest today, and we're going to talk about all the stuff I mentioned before. But before we get to that, I just wanted to share with you, and Brian, I don't know if you know this, years ago I found this out, but one of the really good sources of data for real estate trends and moving trends is actually the truck rental company Uhaul. Because think about it, Uhaul, they know where people are picking up trucks and where they're dropping them off. And that tells you a lot about what's going on with migration trends, doesn't it? And so I thought I'd share this survey. They do a lot of surveys and release a lot of data that's quite interesting. And this is an article from January 6th of this year. So if you think about that in COVID time, that seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Right? Yeah, but it wasn't that long ago. And it says that Uhaul names the top growth state of 2019. And I will reveal that in a moment. But it says that Texas actually slipped from being the number 1 back to the number 2 spot for the do-it-yourself movers. And Florida, not much of a surprise based on the previous podcast this year, became number 1. So the Sunshine State was the number 1 destination in 2019. It greeted the largest number of U-Haul moving trucks entering its borders versus exiting them. That's an interesting thing. And those of you who've been following my work for, a while, even if you were following me back in 2005, 2004, I remember I used to do, there was a screenshot in my seminars that I would always share, renting a U-Haul truck from Irvine, California to Austin, Texas. I used that example. And I also used Irvine, California to Phoenix, Arizona. And I showed how much less expensive it was to bring that truck back to California, because U-Haul was really struggling that everybody would rent their trucks on a one-way rental and they'd leave them at their destination. So if you wanted to, and I just remember this example, roughly what it said, but if you wanted to rent a U-Haul truck to go from Irvine, California to Austin, Texas, for example, that was like $850, okay, plus all the nickel and dime fees. But if you wanted to rent that truck and go the opposite direction, that's what was really interesting. So if you go from Austin, Texas to Irvine, California, now this was back then, but I'm sure the concept holds true still. And you can just go to U-Haul's website and do this yourself. You don't need me to tell you, because you can price it right online. It was only like $170, if you could believe that, for that really long distance. Okay, wow. Putting a lot of miles on the truck. But they literally had to hire people to drive the trucks back because there were so many leaving the state of California. And now we're still seeing these kinds of trends. So to that point, the article says California ranked number 49. Now remember, that's out of 50, okay? And even worse, Illinois rated number 50, okay? For the 4th time in 5 years, pacing the out-immigration states with the largest net losses of U-Haul trucks crossing its borders. So people leaving those places. And the growth states are calculated by the net gain. And so this really just goes to show you, kind of gives you a feel as to what's happening, right? Also, here's a little more micro data for you. Florida arrivals of one-way U-Haul trucks increased 1%, while departures from Florida were down 1% compared to the 2018 numbers. Now, remember, this is 2019 we're talking about, so year over year, small change, right? But arrivals accounted for 50.6% of all one-way U-Haul traffic in the state, okay? And Kissimmee, Ocala, West Palm Beach, that's not far from me, Port St. Lucie, Bradenton, Sarasota corridor led Florida's gains. Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale, Pensacola, Miami, St. Petersburg are among the other notable cities that see a net increase of U-Haul trucks. And also, this is interesting because and Brian, I remember you helped me upload this webinar. We did a webinar recently on Alabama, and Alabama had the biggest year-over-year climb in the rankings of the U-Haul truck rentals or for inbound migration. So pretty interesting stuff. You have to kind of wade through this and, there's a lot to it. But it does give you a feel for what's going on. And that's really all it's designed to do. So good stuff. Shall we get to our guest, Brian?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. Remember that link for Meet the Masters is jasonhartman.com/masters. And one more thing, we are live streaming this evening talking about the history and the future of market bubbles. So join us at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern tonight on Facebook, the jasonhartman.com page on Facebook, or the YouTube channel, and you can see us live stream, and we're going to be talking about bubbles, past, present, and future. So if you're worried about a bubble or a market crash in any asset class, we're not just talking about real estate, we're talking about all assets. Join us tonight for the live stream, and we'll have live Q&A, and you can get your questions answered there. Without further ado, here's the other Brian Adams. It's my pleasure to welcome Brian Adams. He is the founder of Excelsior Capital, and he is a student, like I am, of demographic trends and demographic cohorts, and also an operator and syndicator of office properties in, I believe, 12 markets around the United States. So he has some good insight into what's going on in the office property market. Brian, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. Where are you located?
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a native New Yorker, but I married a Nashville girl. I've been here 15 years now.
Good deal. Well, Nashville's a great place, and I bet you're happy you're not in New York right now.
Yeah, it's a scary scene up there.
It sure is. But, that's a good lead-in to maybe just a broad conversation. I believe, Brian, I was the first person to predict, at least, that I can find, that there would be this mass migration out of urban areas into suburban markets. It was really back when, we were all hearing about Wuhan, and then we heard about Italy. That's when I made that prediction. And then, 2-3 months later, I started hearing it everywhere. It wasn't rocket science. It's kind of obvious, right, that the density is dangerous in the current environment. What are your thoughts about that, especially as you tie it in with demographics, and you study the millennial generation a lot? And I just interestingly saw an article yesterday about how millennials have a new found interest in suburbia, where, the trend for decades has been, back into the cities. And now that we're seeing that reverse, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think very topical considering everything that's happening. Taking a step back, millennials, roughly 75 million people total. I do barely qualify. I'm on the outer edge of it, but under the Pew and Gallup guidelines, I do qualify as a millennial. I think the narrative on Wall Street and in the media was that millennials were never going to get married. They were never going to have children. They were going to live in apartment buildings in Brooklyn and wear tight jeans and eat avocado toast and never leave. And the reality is, because of 2008 and the Great Recession, their family formation was pushed back 5+ years compared to other generations. And so now that they've entered into this maturing millennial phase of life, they are having children, they are getting married, and they're making decisions about where they want to live, work, and play based on quality of life, cost of living, and access to single family homes and education for their children. And COVID, impacting other aspects of the world, is really just accelerating a trend that we've been seeing where they've been relocating to suburban markets. I think we all can agree that over the last 100+ years in America, pretty much every generation has rebelled against their parents' way of life and lifestyle, but ultimately has resumed that style of life and that quality of life just like their parents had. So my parents were of the 60s and the 70s. They thought they were never going to, live in the suburbs and have kids and drive SUVs. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happened. And so I think we're seeing that play out in real time here, but COVID is certainly accelerating that transition. I think you're seeing this mass migration. And if you look at the Uhaul numbers, it's pretty staggering, right, out of New York, out of California. And part of that has to do with COVID, but also
it was already happening. It's been happening for a long time.
Yeah, it's been happening for a long time. And people have been, tracking this. And unfortunately, with those markets, the tax situation is only going to get worse. And it's this pernicious death spiral of the tax base is leaving those markets. So they have to increase taxes and cut services to make up for it.
Right.
And, it's just not going to end well. That being said, do I think New York or San Francisco are, going to go away? Certainly not. This will allow younger people to have a more affordable entry point into those markets. And then the cycle will continue. But I think for the next 10, 15, 20 years, the play is in suburban secondary markets, growth markets, tax-friendly and business-friendly territories.
I couldn't agree with you more. Years ago, I interviewed Meredith Whitney, who wrote a great book called The State of the States. I might have the title slightly wrong, but generally that's the title. And, it just talked about how there's been this mass migration for years out of the high tax, big government, intrusive, mostly left-leaning jurisdictions to more business-friendly, lower tax environments. And so that's true. And now we see all these benefits that these areas offered have just completely evaporated in the current environment. And, we shouldn't just talk about COVID. We should talk about civil unrest, race riots, all of this other stuff that's going on. And there's this crazy assumption. I think it's just a very dangerous assumption that the whole world is making, that we're going to have a vaccine. Maybe we'll never have a vaccine. Maybe it'll take a long time. I mean, I was reading recently that vaccines take many, many years to come to market because you have to put them into healthy people. It's much easier to get approval and understand a pharmaceutical when you're dealing with sick people. But when you're dealing with healthy people, it's much more complicated. I'm not an expert in this, but I was just reading about it. So
that is, I think that's accurate. I'm lucky enough to have married into a family of healthcare practitioners. They all work at Vanderbilt Medical Center. My father-in-law is on the infectious disease pandemic committee at Vanderbilt for their response. And if you look back in history, on average, it takes 4 years, soup to nuts, to get a vaccine widely distributed. Now, the last time we did that, it was a while ago. So hopefully advances in technology will speed that up. But I think it's unrealistic to think that we can compress it from 4 years to 6 months. And so I agree with you. I think, and it's very different between having a vaccine that is effective and distributing that vaccine on a global scale.
Right.
That will take a lot of time, and it will have a lot of logistical challenges, and will require a lot of cooperation globally, which unfortunately the state of play right now in geopolitics is not really conducive to that kind of cooperation.
No, that's very true. But is it possible that there will never be a vaccine, that we will simply have to reach herd immunity, and that's the only hope? or we'll have to live like this forever. I mean, maybe there will never be. What is this sort of arrogant assumption everybody has that humanity can solve every problem and there will be a vaccine? It just takes time, right? Well, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure that's
I'm speaking way out of turn here because I'm just a real estate guy.
Yeah,
but
got it.
I think a more likely outcome is that on a seasonal basis, much like the typical flu that we have today,
it dies down.
Yeah, well, no, that we have a set of people that take a best guess on what the most virulent strain will be for that season. And then we will get vaccinated for that strain, but they're not always going to get it right. So I think we're going to be living with COVID for a long time. And just like the seasonal flu today, we'll have opportunities to have it defervesce, but I'm not sure we'll ever truly go away.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, okay. So tell us more about the millennial trends and what is going on in the office space market, because, many of our listeners are residential investors, but this is all connected, obviously. So what are you seeing for the office property market?
Yeah. Taking a step back, COVID impacting on commercial real estate, I think of it as really just a continuum. Obviously, hospitality and retail, travel, leisure are just getting crushed right now. Mm-hmm. Multifamily, you're starting to see that pain as the PPP wears off and people are defaulting and not paying. And you've got certain jurisdictions like we discussed that are not allowing operators or sponsors to evict people, and that's only exacerbating the problem. Office is probably somewhere in the middle, right? I mean, we're not as insulated as data centers or cell towers, but we're certainly doing better than hotels. Mm-hmm. So we run about 2.5 million square feet total. It's about $350 million portfolio in 12 markets. We've had about 92% rent collection month over month, which is about average. So we've been doing okay, but we certainly have had a lot of rent relief requests and trying to figure out if they're legitimate or opportunistic. And then we have had some tenants have some real challenges. And so trying to work through that. But if you take a step back, I think given that most of these assets are CMBS related on the debt side.
Then that means commercial mortgage-backed securities.
Correct. Yeah. So that is a complex financial market in and of itself, and it will take 6+ months for that to really wash out. So we won't really have a good sense, I think, until Q1 of what the damage has been. I do think suburban, and I'm biased, but I think suburban office is really well positioned. If you look at the trend line over the last 10 years, it was towards really dense space, really expensive build outs. Think of WeWork, where sometimes it was as low as 75 square feet per user in those spaces, whereas the traditional office layout is 250 square feet per employee. You'll see a return to more space and more expensive, more affordable space. And another thing that you don't hear a lot about is, it's rational to think that people don't want to take mass transit to a high rise in New York.
Right.
But if they're relocating to a suburban market or a secondary market, that's still quite a lot of density. And you need to have an asset that can park it. And suburban office offers a really good parking ratio to take on that density.
Mm-hmm. So say that again about the transit.
I think it's reasonable to believe that affluent employees, knowledge-based workers, are not going to want to they're not going to want to drive to a train, then get on a bus, and then get on a subway to walk to their office building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So I think it's going to be more car-centric markets.
Yep.
And, pre-COVID, it was really a negative. Post-COVID, it's a positive.
Yeah. No, it's the environmentalists must be just really upset right now because this is not going to be what they want. They want mass transit, they want high density living, and everybody's just doing the complete opposite. So yes. So it's very interesting. Well, the office space itself, though, maybe the bright side here is that the office space itself within the office suite has to be redesigned for more square footage per employee and wider hallways and all sorts of new concerns. If people are going to come back to offices at all, there's a new way they've got to do it, right? We can't, certainly the co-working model is really out because, like you said, 75 square feet per person versus 250. What do you think about that? Is that a bright spot in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll actually see a renaissance in co-working, but it will be a different model.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll see a return towards more of the old school conservative Regis type layout,
Right.
where you're literally renting an office,
Mm-hmm.
and there will be shared amenities and shared common areas that just won't really be used simultaneously. But I think the concept of benching, hot desking, hoteling, which are all these jargony Wall Street
Right.
terms for jamming people into a small space, that certainly is going away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't think people are going to be working at coffee shops too much anymore either. That's also changed.
When you see the headlines of Facebook and Twitter and some of these tech companies say, oh yeah, we're going to let people work from home forever. If you actually look at what they're doing and read the press releases, it's not that they're letting people work from home, which is different than remote working. I think it's important to draw that distinction. What they're doing is transitioning to a hub and spoke model where you still have the mothership in Manhattan or the Bay Area, but they're allowing a lot of their employees to work in, support secondary markets in places like Nashville, Austin, Denver, et cetera. And I think you'll see more and more of that.
So with that mothership and hub and spoke model, and I have been reading about the hub and spoke model, how big does that mothership need to be, though? That's the thing. It all changes in terms of the size requirement. So, maybe these flagship big companies that can afford it will still have the office in Manhattan or, whatever trophy city, but it's going to be a lot smaller, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen real rent rates in Manhattan decline 20% since COVID. And so I think a lot of users and employers are going to rethink how much they spend on overhead on these type of markets. And I think, to your point, there will be a need to have that trophy office in the trophy market, but it's going to be a much smaller corpus of people that are using it.
Mm-hmm. Well, what else can you tell us? What else do you want us to know? I assume the banks are very concerned about financing deals. I mean, are any new deals going on in the office market, or is that just sort of asleep right now?
That's a great question. We actually closed the deal in June. We bought property at Kansas City on the Kansas side. We were originally supposed to close it the first week of April. It clearly didn't happen. We had to get a different lender. We had to backfill some equity. We really believed in the story there, and we were excited to get it done, but it was a lot of work. And I think what you're seeing right now in real time in transactionally is you hear this term price discovery, which is this fancy way of saying buyers and sellers are not on the same page as to value on assets. And buyers want a discount, and sellers are saying, well, my building is full, and so far everyone's paid the rent. And then buyers are saying, yeah, but can we really, rely on that rent payment for the next 3, 6, 12 months? And the seller's saying, well, that's not my problem. And so that's really the disconnect transactionally. And then I think more fundamentally, the CMBS market for all intents and purposes is paused. And that's a real problem. And bank lenders are trying to keep cash on their balance sheet for defaults on small businesses that they think are going to struggle in a recessionary period. And so it's just very hard to get debt. I would say a way to put it is that the debt market is just really soft right now.
Yeah,
so it's hard to get deals done that way.
Right. So the market has largely frozen up in terms of financing is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. I mean, in the office world, I haven't seen a lot of deals come across our desk, and I haven't heard of a lot of other sponsors or operators getting deals done. It seemed like most people pressed pause in Q1. They put their toe back in the water, but everyone's just very hesitant right now.
Yeah, I agree. This will be continued on the next episode. Thank you for listening, and happy investing. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.